The talks hit me out of nowhere, so I didn't really know how to deal with it at that point. So it was just like, I'm just focused on doing my job. Like, whoever come in here to play, like, it's cool. Like, we had a good run, we still got good players, and if it works for both sides, then let's just do it. You know what I'm saying? But then you see, because James came off the bench for us, and then you see how he plays as a starter. It was just like, hold up. Now, was that a good move?
No team has ever looked like a sure bet to win than the Oklahoma City Thunder in the 2010s. They had everything on their side: youth and high-end talent, a core with 3 future MVPs in KD, Russ, and Harden, reliable starters in Serge Ibaka and Jeff Green behind them, and best of all, every name I mentioned was under the age of 25 for a team that was coming off a 50-win season. They had flexibility and depth. With Maestro GM Sam Presti drafting and making moves, the Thunder were primed to keep everyone together and build a supporting cast that could stack up postseason runs year after year. So how did this absolutely loaded team not only fail to win it all, but fall apart so dramatically after just one NBA Finals appearance? What played the biggest role, bad luck or bad decisions? First, let's jump back to one of the greatest rebuilds we've ever seen. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more content like this.
Hey yo, check out.
As so often happens, a basketball savant was at the helm for some truly masterful team building. The man behind it all? None other than Sam Presti. Way before he made his mark in OKC, and even before he was a part of the Spurs dynasty, Presti was a 16-year-old writing in impeccable basketball takes to his local Boston college. Can you imagine if the hometown kid was with the Celtics at the same time as fellow Bostonian Theo Epstein was with the Sox? With San Antonio, Presti flashed his incredible eye for talent. As just a 24-year-old scout, he played a huge role in the drafting of Tony Parker by dumping VHS tapes of Parker's highlights to make his case. Incoming Thunder owner Clay Bennett was impressed and brought Presti in to immediately begin rebuilding after the Sonics' 31-51 season. Yeah, that's right. Despite being bought by Oklahoma City-based owners, the Sonics were still in for one more awkward season in Seattle. Side note, Adam Silver, right this wrong. Bring back Seattle basketball. Give them an expansion team. The 2007 draft was the first moment for Presti to make his mark. And boy did he ever. In a draft dominated by the Greg Oden-Kevin Durant debate, you can argue whether Presti got lucky in the Blazers drafting Oden, or whether he would have picked KD regardless. Either way, Presti launched a series of moves after landing a franchise cornerstone in Kevin Durant that reshaped the team around youth. Star shooter Ray Allen was sent to the Celtics for the number 5 overall pick, which became Jeff Green. Rashard Lewis was similarly traded to the Magic for a second-round pick, and a valuable trade exception that yielded 2 first-round picks. We'll get to that later. KD's rookie season and the team's last in Seattle was predictably challenging from a win standpoint, as what Bill Simmons dubbed the Zombie Sonics finished near the bottom of the league with a 20-62 record. Durant, however, did win Rookie of the Year and showed tantalizing potential throughout the season, joining Melo and LeBron as the only teenagers to average 20 points a game over a full season. Help was coming to KD in the way of a spectacular 2008 draft. Presti again showcased his incredible ability to spot point guard talent by taking UCLA's Russell Westbrook with the 4th overall pick. Unlike the KD pick, this was not a slam dunk, as the team had been deliberating between him and Stanford's Brook Lopez. They determined, relying heavily on analytics, that Russell could thrive as a point guard despite Darren Collison playing that role at UCLA, and it ended up being an all-time great draft pick. Later in the first round, they struck gold again by drafting Serge Ibaka with one of the picks they'd landed in that trade exception they got for Rashard Lewis. To get a high-end starter with the 24th pick was another masterstroke for Presti and company. Still, they'd have to wait for him to come from overseas. Despite the continued influx of talent, the Thunder were still figuring things out and only went 23-59 on the 08 season. The biggest development might have been getting rid of coach PJ Carlesimo after a 1-12 start and installing Scott Brooks in his place. The team showed improvement from there, and Russ was selected to first-team All-Rookie. They also made a strong move, landing defensive stopper Thabo Sefolosha at the trade deadline. Most importantly, the Thunder had that one last high-end draft pick and used it to perfection. The final piece of the puzzle was the Thunder drafting James Harden 3rd overall in the 2009 draft. Considering the next 3 players drafted were Tyreke Evans, Ricky Rubio, and Johnny Flynn, this was a great pick. It does bear mentioning, though, that Steph did drop to 7 behind back-to-back Wolves point guard picks that still haunt Minnesota fans to this day. With the Harden addition, the Thunder rebuild was complete and the team was off to the races. Kevin Durant led the league in scoring, and at 21 years old became the youngest to ever do it. Russell and Jeff Green were both strong secondary scorers, with Russ adding in 8 assists a game as well. Thabo Sefolosha was a second-team all-defensive selection, and Harden made an immediate impact as a bench scorer, ending up on second-team all-rookie. Serge Ibaka also made his way over and was a defensive force off the bench. Despite winning 50 games, they were only the 8th seed and drew the future champ Lakers in the first round. While LA did beat them in 6 games, there was no question that the Thunder's time was coming. LeBron's free agency and move to South Beach drew the public's attention.
In this fall, I'm going to take my talents to South Beach and join the Miami Heat.
Miami Heat.
But in the West, the Thunder loomed as the future of the league. Phil Jackson himself sang their praises after that first-round series, identifying the Thunder's lack of a true big man as their lone weakness. The summer of 2010 only further solidified the team's promise as Russell and KD teamed up to lead USA basketball to the gold at the FIBA World Cup. Durant began his career as the Team USA GOAT by winning tournament MVP. The 2010-2011 season saw the team improve to 55 wins and the 4th seed in the playoffs, with KD leading the league in scoring again. But there were some consequential lineup changes and trades along the way. Jeff Green was traded to the Boston Celtics, and Presti addressed the big man void with future starting center Kendrick Perkins. Coming out of the shuffle, Serge Ibaka made his way into the starting lineup playing power forward. James Harden's minutes and scoring went up with Jeff Green's departure, and Russell had morphed into a potent second scorer, averaging nearly 24 points a game. With a starting 5 of Westbrook, Sefolosha, KD, Ibaka, and Perkins, with Harden coming off the bench, the Thunder were a dangerous playoff team. Entering round 1, George Karl's attempted mind games in calling the young OKC squad cocky were of no help as the Nuggets fell in 5 games. Next up was the grit and grind Grizzlies, who the Thunder beat in an epic 7-gamer. The Dirk-led buzzsaw that was the 2011 Mavericks stopped the Thunder in 5, but the season and rejiggered lineup was an unequivocal success. The lockout-shortened 2011-2012 season saw the Thunder take another step forward. They finished the season with a 47-19 record, a 58-win pace, and tore through a loaded Western Conference with a 12-3 playoff record to reach the core's first ever NBA Finals. That included a sweep against the defending champion Mavericks, beating the Kobe-led Lakers, and taking down the Spurs after falling into an 0-2 hole. Facing the Big Three Miami Heat, the Thunder won Game 1 before losing 4 straight. It was pretty dramatic though, featuring a famous no-call on LeBron with 5 fouls against KD that could have tied up Game 2. It sure looks to me like LeBron got away with one. There were also close calls in Games 3 and 4 as the supporting cast struggled mightily to score late in games. Then, to top it all off, Mike Miller went nuts off the bench in Game 5 and inserted himself into finals lore. Still, there was no way anyone thought that this would be the high watermark of what was such a promising Thunder team.
Listen, for me, I can't worry about what everybody say about me.
But a really difficult decision was on the horizon. Reigning 6th man of the year, James Harden's contract was up, and he was looking for a max extension. One problem with that: paying James Harden the max would push Oklahoma City into the luxury tax. And considering the fact that the Thunder are a small market team, this was something that the ownership wanted to avoid at literally any cost. Now, there are some theories about the trade. Some, like former teammate Kendrick Perkins, have suggested that Harden was unhappy with his off-the-bench role and would have pushed for a new home regardless. Perk even said that it was Harden's strong showing with Team USA in the London Olympics that hurt. He says Team USA stars like LeBron and D. Wade planted the idea that he should seek greener pastures. If so, a pretty genius move by the Heat stars to destabilize their biggest threat. Harden's pushed back on that, saying the decision to reject the Thunder's offers ultimately came down to money, 100%. In his mind, he was already sacrificing enough by coming off the bench, and there was no way he'd take $1 less than the max. Whatever the true story, OKC's decision not to give Harden a max and to trade him was questionable at the time. This is not revisionist history. For one thing, they had Harden under contract for the following season. While teams hate the idea of losing a guy for nothing, In reality, the landscape of a team or the salary cap can easily change. Who's to say there wouldn't have been a better deal at the trade deadline or even a sign-and-trade the following season? For another, they could have made different choices with the roster, whether that was finding a way to shed Perkins' contract or moving away from a different core piece like Ibaka. Or they could have just signed Harden to the max and kicked the can down the road. After all, Harden's value might go up, and a rising player with years on his deal is always going to have value. Judging how OKC cheaped out and for the things that they ultimately received in the trade package, I think it's fair to say that they underestimated how good James Harden was. They wouldn't be alone in that, but it's a surprising miss for a team that identified talent so well. Houston's trade package for Harden featured a clear rental in ready-to-play sixth-man Kevin Martin, the former number 12 overall pick Jeremy Lamb, and 2 future first-round picks. Chandler Parsons, who was allegedly coveted by the Thunder, was not part of the deal. Unfortunately for the Thunder, this move haunts them to this day. It weakened a daunting NBA finalist and thinned out their secondary scoring. Kevin Martin played solidly in the following season, Jeremy Lamb never really clicked in OKC, and the picks didn't turn into much outside of Steven Adams, who was a really good player. Even still, without Harden, the Thunder were prime contenders. So how did this team continually fall short? The post-Harden Thunder would go on to win 60 games in the 2012-2013 season and entered the postseason as the favorites to repeat as West champs. And in the first round, they of course drew Harden and the Rockets. Unfortunately for them, now infamous pest Patrick Beverley made his mark felt immediately by hip-checking Russell Westbrook in Game 2 of the series. All of this on a routine, non-competitive play after Russ had already called a timeout. Westbrook suffered a meniscus tear in the collision, and without him, the Thunder's title prospects evaporated. They managed to beat Houston, but fell to the Grizzlies in round 2. Kevin Martin left after the season, making him a one-and-done, which only made the Harden trade look worse. The 2014 season saw the Thunder win 59 games, despite Westbrook's 36-game absence. In the playoffs, they made it back to the West Finals against the Spurs. But this time, the revenge-seeking Spurs had the Thunder's number. It didn't help that injury kept Serge Ibaka out of the first 2 games in San Antonio, which the Spurs won in blowouts. The Thunder clawed back to even the series when Ibaka returned, but ultimately the Spurs were able to blow out the Thunder in Game 5, and in Game 6, Tim Duncan brought them home in overtime. The Spurs went on to dismantle the East champs, the Heat, in an uncompetitive 5-game series that ended the LeBron-Wade-Bosh Heat. It's worth considering that the Western Finals was the real NBA Finals and a matchup between the league's 2 best teams. It was clear the diminished Thunder would need some luck to get through the stacked Western Conference. They got none of that in 2015 with a series of injuries, eventually ruling out Kevin Durant for the season. They'd missed the playoffs on a tiebreaker, despite a 45-37 record. In 2016, the defending champion Warriors dominated the regular season, surpassing the legendary 96 Bulls with a 73-9 record. The Thunder almost felt like an afterthought behind Golden State and the number 2 seed in the West, the 66-win Spurs. But in the playoffs, the Thunder absolutely brought it. They steamrolled Dirk and the Mavs in the first round in 5 games, despite losing 1 squeaker and winning the rest in routs. Against that loaded Spurs team with championship pedigree, the Thunder fell down 2-1 in the series, before dominating the second halves of Games 4 and 5 by a 33-point margin. And in Game 6, they throttled the Spurs, taking a 55-31 lead at the half in what would end up being Tim Duncan's final game. With KD and Russ playing a perfect Batman and Robin act, and the overall team defense holding the Spurs to 100 points or fewer in 5 straight games, the Thunder were becoming a dangerous dark horse. And against the Warriors, the Thunder nearly pulled off one of the most shocking upsets of all time. While the basketball should have been enough of a story, Draymond Green's ongoing extracurriculars were a key part of the early goings. In both Games 2 and 3, he found ways to kick Steven Adams in the groin. He wasn't ejected on either occasion, but the flagrant one he earned for the second incident would end up having a major impact. As far as the ball actually being played, the Thunder came in fearless and undaunted by the Warriors' mystique. They took Game 1 in Oakland before the Warriors evened things up with a stellar second half in Game 2. In Games 3 and 4, from the comfort of home, the Thunder took the Warriors to the woodshed with back-to-back blowout wins. Suddenly, the Thunder had the Warriors in a 3-1 hole, on the brink of a stunning upset, with Game 6 on their home court, even if the Splash Brothers could stave off elimination in Game 5. The Warriors did manage to do just that, despite Durant's 40 points. But the Thunder remained favorites to close it out in Game 6 on their home floor. But then, Game 6 Clay happened. With KD and Russ combining to shoot just 21 of 71 from the floor and 1 of 13 from 3, Clay's 41 points and playoff record 11 threes were just too much for the Thunder to overcome. It was a huge opportunity missed, and in Game 7, the Thunder scored a mere 12 points in the third quarter, as Steph Curry poured in 36 points and 7 threes on the game to complete the Warriors' comeback. The lack of scoring punch behind Russell and KD was exposed, with Andre Roberson's ungainly three-point stroke and free throw shooting, and bench pieces like Dion Waiters only providing inconsistent production. Would it have been nice to have James Harden to back up Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook? Probably. Still, the Thunder had come one immortal Clay game away from beating that incredible Warriors team. With Presti at the controls, surely they could add a bench piece or two to jump back into title contention. What happened next was a devastating sequence of bad luck that shut the Thunder's title contention window faster than they could ever have expected. After that painful loss to the Warriors, the Thunder's path seemed pretty clear. They'd have to watch the Splash Brothers repeat as champions, knowing the golden opportunity they'd wasted. They'd re-sign Kevin Durant to a new max contract and look to add to the bench, as well as upgrade the Andre Roberson position. When the Warriors went up 3-1 in the finals against the Cavs, the path seemed pretty clear. But in the midst of all of it, Draymond Green's interesting habit of hitting opponents in the groin emerged at the worst possible moment for the Warriors. After being taunted by LeBron in Game 4, Draymond struck LeBron in the nether regions. The Warriors were unable to take care of business without him on the home floor. The Cavs won Game 6, and despite Draymond's heroics in Game 7, the legendary LeBron chase down block and Kyrie's step back pushed the Cavs to a shocking championship. Somehow, Draymond wasn't done tormenting the Thunder. In one of the most infamous NBA moves ever, he then recruited KD to the Warriors just moments after they'd blown a 3-1 lead of their own to the Cavs. Whether you believe that he FaceTimed KD crying in the parking lot, or his own version of events that include lobbying Bob Myers, it was a bold move. After all, KD had just come a whisker away from knocking out his biggest rival. The Warriors themselves were a few plays away from back-to-back titles and the greatest season ever. They already had a pretty capable Harrison Barnes playing what would become KD's position. Ultimately, the idea of the Warriors even being able to sign KD was a pretty big fluke. A historic $24 million cap spike as the result of new TV deals enabled Bob Myers to let Barnes walk and use the available space to sign Durant to an already loaded roster. The NBA Players Association had fatefully rejected a cap smoothing proposal, and the consequences were an insane Warriors super team and some truly insane contracts for the likes of Evan Turner, Timofey Mozgov, and Luol Deng. What a time to be a player with an expiring contract. Reportedly festering in the background was KD's frustration with playing with the ball-dominant Westbrook. It's not surprising that the chance to play with the very unselfish Steph Curry within the freewheeling Warriors offense was appealing. As it stood, KD was gone, and with nothing coming back in return to OKC. Exactly the scenario they'd feared when they dealt away James Harden. The Thunder's run of being a title contender was over. The Warriors were on to a dynasty. The basketball world flamed KD and Draymond, only to be forced to relent when KD kept on winning finals MVPs. As a competitive and determined GM, Sam Presti, of course, didn't give up. The Thunder built around Russ and facilitated his historic triple-double MVP season, which, yes, included some questionable stat padding, but let's not forget, also had some awesome moments. They'd add some big names into the mix the following season, like Paul George and Carmelo Anthony. But they'd turned into a lower-end playoff team that couldn't get past the first round, even after Paul George's bizarre about-face to stay in OKC kept the hype going a little longer. Presti was into rebuild mode by the summer of 2019, when both Russ and PG-13 were shipped away. Being the genius that he is, he fleeced the Clippers in the podcast P trade, landing future MVP candidate Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. With all the pieces he's assembled on this roster, the Thunder are once again in the position they were a decade ago, with a loaded young roster stocked with cornerstones. Mirroring the KD, Russ, Harden, and Ibaka wealth of talent, they have Shea, Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren, and Lou Dort, with Isaiah Hartenstein as a high-profile addition in the middle. Everything is in place, but they have to avoid the pitfalls that doomed the Thunder of the past. First and foremost, the ownership can't get cheap. The Thunder are set to be a money-making machine with a loyal fan base in a league whose franchise values and TV contracts keep skyrocketing. There is no time to think about short-term cash considerations when it comes to retaining Jalen Williams and Chet for the long haul. If you're not in it to win rings, maybe it's time to sell it to someone who is. If you want to talk about navigating that terrifying second apron that we broke down in another video, that's a fair discussion. But that's where management has to let Presti cook. He has a stockpile of assets, and he has to be trusted to wheel and deal without a blanket policy at all times to keep the team in one position or another. Another factor that the coaches have to keep an eye on is team chemistry and happiness. Right now, the Thunder seem exceptionally close, and keeping that culture will be vital to staying on the same page through ups and downs, like the previous Thunder couldn't and the Jays in Boston could. There are no excuses for repeating the same mistakes that cost the previous era of the Thunder NBA immortality. With an ownership group and a GM who have been through it, this OKC edition is set to separate themselves from the what-ifs of the KD, Russell, Harden era and live up to all of their own promise.